I am interested in how you first discovered philosophy, whether it was first reading philosophy or sort of discovering that you had this knack for curiosity, this sort of inward curiosity, asking questions, these big questions about life. I know that in the book, which I'll put up here, but everyone should check out the whole story, you start out in your more or less like in your college days. And if I'm understanding this right, you're taking a couple classes, not quite sure, where this is going. You have an influential philosopher in, your life at that point. But I'm curious, is that where the interest started, or where did you discover philosophy in the first place?
Well, I mean, I think I'd always been, um, even at a very young age, interested in the big questions, right? Even as a child, I think I was very curious about God and life, and you know, and I was very interested even at a very young age. But I got interested in philosophy because I took a philosophy class, and it was just an introductory philosophy class, and it wasn't the philosopher that I wrote about in the book, Bob Solomon. This guy's last name was Perlmutter, and I think it was a class kind of on religion. He was an atheist, and so he was asking a lot of he kind of got me going on the problem of evil question, right? And so, but what I liked about that, there were two things I liked about that class a lot. Unlike any other class I'd ever taken, I mean, in my entire life, this class was a class where we just asked questions and had dialogue. And he would ask a question, you give an answer, and he'd ask another question, kind of like Socrates, a little bit of the Socratic method here. And so it got me thinking. It was always like I thought I had a good answer, and then he would point out where my flaws and my or incompleteness of my thinking was. And then it was a class where we're basically in dialogue the whole time. So it wasn't, I mean, we had text to read, but we would discuss the text in this very open, fluid way. I had never encountered that before. And I was hooked. I said, man, I am learning so much because and I would say, what people ask me, why'd you take philosophy? What's the good of philosophy? And I said, well, philosophy taught me how to think. It taught me how to think. Most people do not think. It took me even much of my adult life to realize most people are not even rational. They're just bundles of feelings, and they just go all over the place. They can't defend their feelings. They can't defend their thoughts. If you question them, they get angry and attack you. And so I love philosophy because, and then as I realized, wow, you have all these philosophers taking on these big questions, and they all came up with, different answers, and then they'd criticize each other, and I just loved everything about it. You know, later on, you do a Myers-Briggs test, and I'm an INTP. And if you know that typology test, it's like that's the kind of guy that either becomes a philosopher or an entrepreneur or both.
That's fascinating. I There's such a kindred spirit with you because I had the exact same experience when I was in college. I was always someone who would ask the big questions, and I was interested in, yeah, God, of course, and religion, but also I didn't know these terms at the time, but things like metaphysics, what the world is like, and epistemology. How do we know these sorts of things? And I took my first college class and had the exact same experience. I was looking around and I was going, well, this is the discipline. You get to just sort of explore what you're naturally. How is this a discipline? This is just what I think about anyway. And it was just this eye opening experience. And part of the reason I bring that up is I also share with you, I know your father was a professor, and you mentioned that you had discussions with him, and maybe even that was like a training. My father was also a professor, and so I have in mind these kitchen table conversations where we would discuss things. I'm wondering, it's sort of surprising to me that, well, maybe I should phrase it this way, that I would speculate that a lot of those conversations were helpful for you in sort of talking about the big questions and learning how to think. And am I wrong in that, or was that sort of
Well,
like a precedent for?
with my dad, he wasn't. I talk about it in the book as well. My dad was not really interested in big questions. I remember I tell a story in the book that when I was 21 or whatever, or 20, and I was asking the big questions. And I asked my dad, Dad, what do you think? Does God exist? Do you think there's a heaven? And what happens when we die? And he says, son, I don't know. I don't know. I will tell you that when I was about your age, I spent a couple hours one day trying to figure all that stuff out. I couldn't do it. And to be honest, I haven't thought about it since. So my dad he grew up in a generation, he grew up in the Depression, right? And then World War II broke out. And when he was 20 years old, Japan bombed. And so next thing you know, he's in the military. And he's of that generation that wanted financial security. They had to be pragmatic. They had to make sacrifices for their country, for their families. And after World War II was over, they're the ones that created the suburbs. They just wanted to go out and plant a garden and their kids be safe and go to school. And that for them was the good life. And it was spiritually empty, but they weren't interested in that. They were interested in just, being able to live, have some pleasure for one thing, because they had sacrificed so much. So different generation, different mindset. I always tell people that in a lot of ways, I was like my father's astronaut that he sent out to go in a direction that he wasn't able to go in. He wasn't able to pursue his real dreams. He couldn't be an entrepreneur. I thought he would have been a good one. He had to make these sacrifices. He got married young. But at the dinner table, so we weren't arguing about metaphysical, epistemological questions. We were arguing about capitalism, the economy, politics, and my dad. He was a very smart, very intelligent man, and he was a debater, and I learned to think dialectically. And it became the way I engaged with the world dialectically. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis, and that so the Hegelian methodology became kind of natural to me, is because that's kind of the way I thought. And so I'm a good debater. It took me years to realize most people don't think that way. Most people don't like to have their ideas challenged. Most people don't like to lose a discussion or a debate. You get hated. And so as I got older, I became a little gentler and a little wiser. And, some friends I just don't discuss things with because they get too upset. Here's a good way to think about it, Jared, is that I don't identify with my ideas, in the sense that the way I like to explain it is, if I have a belief, it's kind of like I have some clothes on right now. When today's over, I'm going to go home. I'm going to take the clothes off. I may wear them again sometime, but I may not. I'm not my clothes, right? But similarly, I'm not my beliefs. I take beliefs on. If they no longer make sense, I discard them, like taking clothes off. I'm not my beliefs. I'm not my clothes. But I found that most people are their beliefs. And if you attack their beliefs, they believe that you're attacking them personally. And so that was like a deja vu, and I finally figured out, oh my God, these people think if I disagree with their beliefs that I think something's wrong with them. And so anyway, that was a later discovery. I wish I'd known that one when I was younger.
I've heard you talk about that before. I swear you're a born philosopher, because that's part of, as you know, what we do in the discipline is you're going to hold up arguments to the light and say, hey, how does this stack up in terms of like its quality, and not only arguments, but particular beliefs too. And I've heard you mention just your priority of seeking the truth above all else. And if it's a
Right.
good argument, it's a good argument. And so I can see the precedent for that pretty clearly.
Also, when I change my mind, I think that's something to celebrate, because that means I've learned something. I'm a little wiser than I was the day before. And so I think one of the things that made me, one of my leadership virtues, I have plenty of leadership vices. One of my virtues was, when I was wrong, I was wrong. I would always admit it to the group, to the team, and say, and that sets a good example. I'm sorry, I was wrong about that. That didn't work. So we're going to have to try something differently. So being able to admit your mistakes, to be able to admit that when you're wrong, really takes the leader down and helps you connect better with people, because he's not perfect either. He doesn't know everything either. He makes mistakes too. It's good for the leader not to be wrong all the time, obviously, but it's good for the leader to, when they are wrong, to be able to admit it and apologize for it.
So I've thought about this question, and you have this point of view that's so unique, and this history and perspective on the world of, let's say, CEOs, these very successful people. And I'm wondering, your comment earlier, most people, let's say, like, aren't engaged in critical thinking maybe as much as they should be, and don't share that sort of like passion for getting at the truth. I'm wondering, at the CEO level, in your experience, is that still true? Or in your experience, does being a CEO and someone who's successful, is it a prerequisite that you have to have at least some sort of, passion for critical thinking? Or how would you describe that to someone who isn't in that world?
Well, good question. It's a little more complicated. First of all, I think you need to make a distinction between a CEO and an entrepreneur, because most CEOs of big public companies, they didn't found the company, right? They mostly came up through business schools, became MBAs. They're professionals, and as professionals, they have a loyalty, you might say, to their profession and to their career. Whereas the entrepreneur who creates something, that's their baby. They think about it differently than a professional does. So, and most people that found companies are CEOs of their companies, but then eventually they either sell it or they retire and they move on, and somebody else takes over that doesn't. It's like nobody loves their kids as much as their parents do, right? And so, CEO and the company an entrepreneur creates is like their child. Always going to love the child. Nobody ever loved Whole Foods as much as I did. That's just the way it is. And I think what to be a good CEO, you have to be willing to move on from things, because the market is constantly evolving. People don't understand. This is what makes capitalism the best system. It's dynamic. You can innovate, and people can see what you're doing and they copy it, and then they iterate on it. So there's this constant upward spiral of change, of improvement. And so it never sits still. You can never rest on your laurels. No matter how good you think your competitive advantages are, you're vulnerable to being disrupted. You take something like Google, that we think, wow, it's like a monopoly. Those guys are just printing money, and they still are. However, AI is highly disruptive. Google has to, if they don't lead in AI, why is anybody going to just Google anything? They're just going to talk to their AI. So if Google doesn't have the best AI, maybe they're going to lose their search advantage and all the advertising that comes along with that. So that's the way it always is. I mean, Google disrupted Yahoo, and these things are constantly changing and evolving. So I say that because the CEO has to always be thinking about how to create more value for their customers, and how it's changing, and how you have to, things that worked in the past may not work in the future, or may not be working now. So you have to move on from them. And that means you have to let go of things that you might have created yourself, or that you really love, that you don't want to let go of. I mean, that first wake up call for me was when my first store was called Safer Way, and it was Renee's and my ideal store. It was a vegetarian store. It didn't sell alcohol. We didn't sell white sugar. We were selling no coffee, and so it was like, wow, we're really got a pure store. And Saferway wasn't very successful. It barely broke even. And it wasn't until we relocated, we kept the natural, organic emphasis, but we said we got to sell food that our customers want to buy. So we started selling meat. We started selling coffee. We started selling beer and wine. We started selling some sugar. We started selling some white flour. And that new store exploded. It became the highest volume natural food store in the United States 6 months after it opened, because we were giving the market what it wanted. We had to move on from what we thought was the ideal scenario to what the market was willing and wanted to buy. And that never really stopped. We constantly, a lot of people believe that, you sold out. It's like, no, the perfect's the enemy of the good. We're in a dialogue with our customers. and they said they wanted this. And did we want to give it to them? Well, no, we didn't think it was particularly good for them, but that's what they wanted. And that's what business has to do. That's one of the biggest misunderstandings about business is they flip it around. They say business corrupts people. They get them to take things that aren't good for them. Well, maybe sometimes that happens through advertising or whatnot, but most of the time, business is just trying to sell people what they want to buy. And people want to buy things that aren't good for them. That's a simple fact. But we want to make the business a villain, and the person buying it as the victim. And so that's the paradox there.
Do you find yourself unique among your peers in having such a mission centered, I don't know if you would call it a business model, but having such a passion for your mission since day one? And from an outside perspective, it seems like that's maybe your primary driver, or at least one of the primary drivers,
Sure,
and
exactly.
asking these big questions and having this really kind of an ethical mission to it.
Yeah, I'm very idealistic. So, and I still am, and it's always about. It was so important when I learned that the perfect was the enemy of the good. How much good can you do? Well, you can't do any good at all if you just want to stay on a mountaintop and be holier than thou than everybody else. You may feel really good about how pure you are, but you're actually not impacting the world in a positive, real way. Uh, so the mission-driven thing was very rare when we got going. I thought in a long time Whole Foods was about the only company out there doing it. But then when I read my co-author of Conscious Capitalism, Raj Sisodia's book, Firms of Endearment, I realized they picked out 30 companies that were loved by all of their stakeholders. Whole Foods was one of those 30 companies. So I realized, wow, there's at least 29 others that are very similar to us. And then when we wrote Conscious Capitalism, that sort of, we kind of ignited, that book kind of ignited, particularly among young entrepreneurs, the desire to put purpose first. And so the older companies, they couldn't make that shift, right? Their cultures were too powerful in a certain direction. It's hard for Coca-Cola or Pepsi to all of a sudden become mission driven. Even if they said they were, they probably at their core were not. But new companies, that's another great thing about capitalism. Entrepreneurs start up new businesses, and they don't yet have, they're not stuck in their ways. They can try new things. And so I don't think purpose driven businesses are rare today, particularly for startups and younger companies. I think it's people, even if they're not doing it, they're given lip service to it. It's they say, ever heard that saying, hypocrisy is the is what vice complements virtue with. it's I don't think I got that quote quite right, but you've heard that, something similar to that before. And I think that's what's happened. People realize, well, purpose matters, and businesses should have a purpose. And so it's kind of moving into being anti in the game, you might say, for most startups now. They want to have a mission statement almost from the very beginning of their businesses. And I think most of the companies you most admire in the world do have higher purposes. I mean, that was the first question I asked Jeff Bezos when we were talking about Amazon buying Whole Foods. I said, "What's your higher purpose?" And he says, "Our higher purpose is to be the most customer-centric company in the entire planet Earth." And does Amazon always live up to that? No, but they are very customer-oriented, and they continue to ask that question: How do we serve our customers better? I mean, I remember just the other day I ordered something in the morning, and it was delivered to me like by noon. And it wasn't like Whole Foods. I didn't have to pay any extra for it. It was just a prime delivery, same day delivery, just 3 hours later. So they've continued to upgrade their commitment to being Earth's most customer centric company. So Google's, organize the world's information. So some of these big corporations also have higher purposes to them. Although as the money gets higher, and the shareholders push down on them, there's definitely pressures to move away from it.
I heard you say in another interview that the conversation with Jeff Bezos was like a soulmate conversation, and so I'm interested in. You mentioned that you alluded to it, but I'm interested in what made it a soulmate conversation. Was it
Did I
this
use?
mission centric?
Did I actually say soulmate?
Uh, as I wrote it down, so I possibly not, but I it
No.
struck me.
Let me rephrase. Let me put it in another way to understand it.
Uh huh.
Entrepreneurs recognize other entrepreneurs, and when we met with Amazon's team that first day that we were talking about the merger, that was like a meeting of the minds because they were thinking just the way we were thinking about. I mean, not just the same way. Amazon has a different perspective, but we were thinking like entrepreneurs, asking these questions about how to create more value and the things we could do different, how we could innovate. And what I loved about Jeff was how well he's brilliant. He's a genius, but he's also highly creative, and he really thinks outside the box. He doesn't think like most other people think, or even most other entrepreneurs think. I think that's one reason Amazon's been so fabulously successful. And that's where the meeting of the soulmate thing came from. Is like, it's like anytime I meet an entrepreneur, they don't have to be rich and famous like Jeff Bezos. They can be just a youngster who hasn't done anything yet. But it's that same hunger to know, to learn, to evolve. Um, I don't think I think the academic world, for example, radically underestimates how creative entrepreneurs are. I think the greatest living example now that Steve Jobs has passed on, is Elon Musk. You know, whatever you think of his politics, Elon Musk is a genius. And I've met with Elon a few times. The guy is absolutely brilliant. His mind never stops working. He's highly creative. He thinks of things. Well, think about doing a company to dig under, a boring company, or I mean, or on his way to Mars. Oh, by the way, I created Starlink, which we can do internet. We can link the whole planet up without having to build cell towers. I figured that one out because we're trying to go to Mars, and because he's very purpose driven, right? That's his real thing. He thinks DNA needs to get off the planet. Humans to survive needs to be somewhere else besides planet Earth, and that's a big dream, and it's very purpose driven.
Right. And so if you were to like rewind to the start when you were founding Whole Foods, if your primary motivation at that point was, let's say, wealth and success, as opposed to sort of purpose driven, mission driven, how different would it look, over the course of the years if that was your primary driver?
You know, I think that's a very difficult question to answer because you're asking me to be somebody different than who I am. And how can I know how I would be if I was that kind of person? I'd be thinking, feeling differently, and I'm not that way. So, I could project. Well, I'd be greedier. I, I, I would have just tried to. I'd try to become a billionaire. I would have stopped. I would have loaded myself up with stock options. I would have. I wouldn't have given them away like I did at Whole Foods. I would just be completely different. I would have business might have crashed and burned because I wouldn't have been able to draw the same kind of talent in that I brought in at Whole Foods um, because of who I was. So it's asking an impossible question to answer. Really, I don't really know.
I think that's a great answer. I mean, part of my motivation for asking it was I have in mind like a very young person who just in a general sense wants to be an entrepreneur, wants to start a business, and their primary driver and motivation is because, well, you can see the sort of benefits that you get. You can get wealthy and you can get success and
That's not
and
why most
whatever else.
people. That's not my experience of most entrepreneurs. I mean, I'm not saying they don't want to make money, but most entrepreneurs are basically on fire about something. Is they want to do something. Entrepreneurs are doers, and they can take ideas and they want to take the ideas and make them real. They don't want to just be say fantasize about it. The thing about an entrepreneur is they're part philosopher and part doer. And what Marx say, it's not enough philosophers just to interpret the world. It's the thing idea is to change the world, but all Marx did was he was a scribbler at the end of the day. Whereas entrepreneurs actually go out and change the world because they're making concrete some vision they have in their minds. They're passionate about something, and they're highly creative. That's what things don't. Most of the average people do not understand how creative entrepreneurs are. And most of the ideas are terrible ideas that don't work. They're, we see the successes, we see the survivals. We don't see all the failed and dead ends. That even somebody like, I guarantee Elon Musk has probably failed at more businesses than he succeeded at. We just don't know about him because he pulled the plug early on.
Yeah, that makes sense. I want to ask, so you mentioned the sort of philosophical aspect. In a conversation with our mutual friend Tom Morris, he mentioned that at a certain point, this was years ago before it was trendy, you had at least some sort of interest in Stoicism and came across Tom Morris's book. So I'm curious about where
That's not
that
the
interest.
first book, but I read Stoicism later. I read his first two books. I read his were, I think it's Tom's recounting of it, but I think it was The Art of Achievement and True Success for the first two books of his he read. And then I kind of worked my way through Tom's books because he's a very good writer and he's a philosopher and he asks big questions. So, it's a funny thing about Tom. He's written books about Stoicism, but you should ask Tom. I don't think Tom's a Stoic. I think Tom's an Epicurean. Tom loves.
Interesting.
He may have changed, but he loves his red wine, and he loves the subtle pleasures of living. And I think a Stoics is much more austere, more ascetic, you might say. And Tom is definitely a man who enjoys the life and the good life.
Right. So where would you put yourself? Would you call yourself a Stoic in some sense?
I always think the Stoics they're fatalistic. I'm not very fatalistic. I'm I mean if you read the whole story, if you read it carefully, I think I've become a mystic. I've gone 180 degrees. I've gone back into the big questions, but I came up with answers. I'm more Spinoza. I believe God is in everything, and this is a dream that we're creating with our minds and our emotions and our interpretations. You get back into epistemology, which is how do we know anything? And it's like, well, we take our senses, that they're reporting on us. But I actually think it's more than they're just giving us data. Our emotions, our thoughts, they're actually or here's the best way I try to explain it to people by a metaphor. So when we sleep at night, Jared, we dream. But we're a character, we're the dreamer, but we're also a character in the dream, right? Who are the other characters that seem to be acting independently of us? They seem to be acting independently of us. But how's that possible if we're the dreamer? They can't be acting. We must be creating that as well. And so where I got to is, well, we think when we wake up, we're waking up to reality. But what if we're just waking up to another dream? And you might say what the experiment I'm doing, the empirical experiment I'm doing is I believe that the world reflects back. It's like a mirror, and it reflects back to us exactly the energy that we put out. And so my epistemological life experiment at this point is the more love, gratitude, kindness, and forgiveness I put out, I'm finding that's reflecting back to me. So, and if I get judgmental and angry and hateful, if I get guilty, guess what? The world begins to reflect that back to me. So then this is, so I'm sort of validating this experiment I'm doing. It's kind of a life experiment now. So it's like, how much love, or as my wife says, John, just love everyone all the time, no exceptions. And as I do that, my dream is becoming a happier dream. So I am verifying my hypothesis. Of course, terrible things could still happen. I might have to change my mind again. I'm prepared to do that. But so far, this is what the data is showing me. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. I mean, that's really interesting. I have to imagine that that's going to inform the way that you spend your social time and your recreation, and that you have certain priorities about that, right? The kind of people that you surround yourself with that are maybe thinking along the same lines. Am I on
Well,
the right track?
yes, except I'm not just hanging around with people that necessarily agree with me, because because in the dream, it's like sometimes when I'm dealing with somebody that I think is really seems to be really angry, and I again think it's part of my dream. So then the question is, can I lift their energy up, or will they take me down? So it's like interacting with a dream character when you're asleep, right? Are you going to battle with them, or can you connect with them in some other way? So um, I take that on as a game, like I gamify it. It's like a challenge. Can I keep my heart open and loving despite the fact that this person's treating me very terribly? And and can I shift them? And often I can't always, but oftentimes I can. I shifted this woman today. I was getting my blood taken for a member of Function Health, and I was getting my blood taken today, and I could tell she was really in a she wasn't in a good space. So I was just smiling at her. And I said, "What's your name?" "My name's Melly." And I said, and so I just kind of showered her with all this love and goodwill, and she just brightened up. She just completely shifted. It's like that's very satisfying when you're able to make somebody happy that was really kind of glum. It was early in the morning. It was 6:50 in the morning when I was getting this blood drawn. She was probably hungover or whatever. Anyway, I was able to make that shift today. So I felt great about it too. Wow, I made her happy. That's great.
That's very cool. I heard you mention at some point that one of your happiest times where you had this increased sense of well-being was actually when you were founding the first Whole Foods market, when that was starting to thrive and be successful. And I want to make sure that I have enough time to talk with you about this new Love.Life venture
Hmm.
that you're
Yeah.
on. And I'm wondering how you would compare sort of that period where things were thriving, it was new, and then decades later now you're starting this new venture. I would imagine that there are some parallels there, but like, how do you compare those two phases?
They're actually, I think, more different than they are similar. And so when I think back to starting Whole Foods in the early days, we were building it. I was young, full of energy, not nearly as wise, you might say, as I am today, and a lot poorer than I am today. But I was all in for it, right? And so um, that was so satisfying because I was at my peak creativity. And when I always tell my friends, it's like, if there's something more fun than creating and building a business, I haven't found it. This is the most creative. And then there's setbacks, but you're doing it with people that you love, and you're sharing the triumphs and you're sharing the setbacks together, and it's bringing you closer together. And as you become successful, there's sort of a euphoria in that. It's like, yes, we can make a difference. We can. It's working. Our ideas are working, because most people tell an entrepreneur their ideas aren't going to work. You climb because the general attitude is like, well, that seems pretty risky to me. That seems really risky. And hey, if that's such a good idea, how come nobody's doing it? It must not be a very good idea if somebody would already be doing it. And it's like, and so you seem like you're crazy to people. People are always telling me, you want to do natural and organic supermarkets? Who the hell's going to shop there? I had a venture capitalist tell me, he says, look, you're just a bunch of hippies and you're selling food to other hippies. That's not a very big market, because he was of a different generation. He didn't see what I could see. Well, this generation's coming up and you're going to be leaving the stage. And so entrepreneurs have to overcome that sort of skepticism. But as your ideas begin to work, imagine if you're a philosopher and you're putting your ideas down in a book, and you think, wow, these are good ideas, and then people like your book, and it's a bestseller. And next thing you know, you're getting invited on talk shows. Everyone wants to talk to you about your ideas. It's like, as an author myself, I know there's very few things more satisfying than somebody saying, "I read your book. I really liked it. here's what I liked about it. This changed my life in certain ways. Wow, the feeling that an author gets from that is amazing, right? It's like, because it's like almost like you're putting a message in a bottle and throwing it in the ocean. You never know who reads it, if it makes any difference, or whether it just crashed and nobody read it in the first place. So it's the same way with an entrepreneur. You're creating a business, and as that business makes a difference in people's lives, as people like it, as they love it, wow, it's such a great feeling. So I had that feeling, and Love.Life, I'm giving it my wisdom, I'm giving it my capital, but I'm not engaged at the depth of the way I was at the original Whole Foods. First of all, I'm 72. I want to spend time with my friends and my wife. I don't know how many more years I have left. I want to travel. I'm not all in Love.Life the same way I was at Whole Foods, where it was all I did for about 20 years. I just lived Whole Foods every single. My wife told me that things she liked about me. At first, I was so passionate about what I was doing, and passion it's an attractor. People come, they get, anybody that's passionate about something, music or whatever, art, people get excited about it. Musician. So I'm excited about Love.Life, but I have other people that are sort of engaged in it full time doing it, and so it's just different. Does that make any sense?
Yeah,
Um,
that does make sense. I can completely see that. And maybe one question to ask is: it does seem like there's a lot of continuity in terms of mission from Whole Foods to
oh
this. And
yeah.
I've heard you tell, well, I've heard you talk about it in a number of ways. But I'm wondering, how do you understand the continuity of mission from Whole Foods to this?
Great question. And frankly, I didn't understand it. I started to understand it when I wrote the whole story. Sometimes, and I always tell people they should write a memoir, because in some ways, only looking backwards in your life do some of the patterns, threads come together, and you see the patterns, and you see. So I saw that when I quit Whole Foods, I thought, well, that's done. I can just retire and I'm done. I've made my contribution. But what I realized is I wanted to do Love.Life because I thought it could help thousands of people at the very least, and perhaps millions of people over time, be healthier, feel better, live longer. That's a worthwhile goal. And then I began to realize, well, that's really what Whole Foods was all about. People eating healthy food, feeling better, having stronger immune systems, living longer. And yeah, so Love.Life is not just doing food, though, it's doing it in all these other ways. So that's the difference, but it's the same higher purpose that drove me to do Whole Foods is driving me to do Love.Life. And I didn't think I realized that, because you're following your heart, you're following your passions where it's leading you, but sometimes it's just tacit knowledge. It's not yet explicit. You have to be conscious of it. Then once you become conscious of it, you can do it in a more skillful way.
I heard you in an early interview. This was probably around 2020 or so. You said something like, "When I'm finished with Whole Foods, something like, watch out, I'm going to be unleashed." And I'm wondering, is this is that what's happening right now? Do you feel a
Here's the
sense
thing.
of becoming unleashed?
Now, what I was talking about then was, so back in 2009, I wrote an op-ed piece. It was in the Wall Street Journal, and it was about it was when Obamacare was being launched, and I did a critique of it, and it was extremely controversial. Um, I just was just what is an op-ed piece? It's an opinion piece, right? But this one blew up, and I was actually going on a hike for a week in Maine. I came out of Maine, and I pushed the button to send it to the Wall Street Journal, and then I went off on this hike where I was out of touch for a full week. I came back to this storm, and the storm, thousands and thousands of people were writing letters and emails to our board of directors demanding that I be fired. You know, before we didn't have cancel culture, but that's what they wanted to happen do to me back in 2009. We had boycotts at our stores all around, just like you had King's Day. They had sort of anti-Whole Foods Day because I was trying to stop people from having free health care. In that op-ed piece, I wrote two things that really pissed people off. One was that I quoted Margaret Thatcher, who said, "The problem with socialism is that you eventually run out of other people's money." And that started it out that way. And then I finished this op-ed piece by saying it's an assumption that this is what philosophers do. They ask questions. It's like, uh, why do people have a right to free healthcare? Because that's sort of that's called a shibboleth that the progressive left believes, that everybody has a right to healthcare. And it's like, I just asked the question, like, well, why? Why do you have a right to healthcare? Somebody else has to pay for it. Why do you have a right for healthcare? If you have a right to healthcare, does somebody in Chad have a right to healthcare? Do I have to pay for them? If they're a human, do they have a right to healthcare, free healthcare? And so that, just raising that question pissed people off. It made people extremely angry, because it's like, well, everybody has a right to healthcare. It's an assertion that really can't be defended in any kind of rational way. It's a human right, and that's what they believe. So those two things really upset people, because I was really questioning it. And so the results of that were, by the way, were that my board of directors never let me write another op-ed piece. So when I say I was unleashed, they were constantly threatening. They began to threaten Whole Foods market. This is what I began to realize, is that, and Elon Musk had to deal with this, by the way, when they started blowing up Tesla cars. And it's like, they basically threatened to hurt Whole Foods market if I didn't shut up. And let's just say I did shut up, because the board told me to shut up. So I was leashed. I was intimidated. I would have kept doing it, but it would hurt. It's like if you have children and somebody threatens to kill your children if you don't do what they say, you're probably going to do what they say. So even though it goes against your ethical code, you still love your children. And I love Whole Foods. I didn't want it to be hurt. So when I retired, it was like, I'm unleashed. I can write and say what I want to. I don't have to worry about Whole Foods any longer. And an ironical thing happened, though. Pretty much after I said that, I realized, I don't want to fight with everybody anymore. I just want to love everyone all the time. That became my working hypothesis. So I've been unleashed, but I wish to do no harm. So that's the ironical thing about it.
Well, that's great. So it's about the leash. It's not really about like what you need to do being
Right.
unleashed. That
Yes,
sounds
I'm
that sounds
unleashed,
right.
but I'm not going to fight anybody.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds right. Well, I do want to. So you mentioned healthcare, and it reminded me we haven't got to the origin story of Love.Life or what it is. I kind of assume that the audience knows what it is, but I'm wondering if you could let the audience know, what is this thing that you've been creating. When I first heard this idea, I mean, I mentioned before we started
You haven't seen it
recording,
yet, have you, Jared?
I have not seen it yet. I mean, when I first heard it, I
Have you
thought
gone
this
to
is too
have you
good to
looked
be
at the
true.
website? Have you looked at the website?
I have looked at the website. It's a really
Okay.
nice looking, clean website. Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
So, uh, Love Life's an idea I've had since 1985. So 40 years. I almost did one. I almost did a smaller version called LifeWorks back in 1985. I wrote about it in the whole story. And what Love Life is, it's our subtitle is a holistic health club. We're a holistic health club, and so we know our healthcare system is broken in America, and it's broken in a lot of ways. Forget about the funding of it for a second. Who pays for things? It's broken because we're following basically a plumber's model. So when do you hire a plumber?
Something's wrong.
Yeah, when your pipes break. Well, that's generally when we go see a doctor, when something breaks. And that might have made sense 100 years ago when people were dying from infectious diseases, tuberculosis, flu, cholera, all kinds of infectious diseases. Um, Before we had antibiotics, before we had vaccines, infectious diseases killed most people. Today, if you look at the leading killers in America, first is heart disease, second is cancer, third, which you'll almost never see published, but is true, is healthcare itself is the third leading killer in America. Hospital mistakes, infections people pick up in hospitals, too many prescription drugs that have bad effects on people, opiates that people get addicted to in the hospitals, and painkillers and that kill people. So, and then you've got after that you've got like obesity. 74% of Americans now are overweight. 43% are obese. Think about that. 43% of adults in America are obese. And it's not slowing down. It's continuing to climb. Think of it this way, Jared. We're all on a health journey. And all of us can be healthier than we are. So Love.Life starts with the idea that first we need to get your baseline established. So we have to do testing, just like I talked about doing the function blood test this morning. But we do more than just blood tests. That's in LA. Our first location's in Los Angeles. I'm in Austin, so it's not always convenient for me. But we test people. We get your baseline established. We find out where you are on your health journey, and then we have a team of people that will work with you to become the healthiest version of yourself. And that a lot of that will involve some lifestyle changes in terms of what you eat, exercise, sleep, stress management, toxins that you take in. But the thing is, now we can measure things very well so we can get a good baseline established. We can also measure things on an ongoing basis. So we have these smart watches that are getting smarter all the time. And they can tell us on a daily basis so many important things about us. For example, I had AFib. I had an ablation a year and a half ago. My Apple Watch is what told me I had AFib. And then I went into it. I didn't even know. And I went in to see the doctor and they said, oh, yeah, you have AFib and we need to do something about this. And so we have these, and we can measure these things on an ongoing basis. So first you test people, and then you create a plan for them, and then you measure them on a regular basis, and then you get feedback so that we help people become. That's a good doctor, but also a well-care team is going to work with you. But it's physical health, emotional health, spiritual health, all of those are important. And so Love.Life is one-stop holistic health center. It's huge. It's 45,000 square feet. It's an old Best Buy. We've got a healthy restaurant there. We've got a state-of-the-art fitness gym. We have a yoga studio. We have Pilates. We have 3 indoor pickleball courts. We have all this recovery biohacking modalities, from hyperbaric oxygen chambers to PIMP machines to lymphatic massage suits. We have a spa. We have a medical center so that we can test people and begin to work with them to become the healthiest version of themselves. I really do think we call ourselves the new future of health. I believe that these will be common 20 years from now. Humans' overall health is going to continue to go up because we now know so much more than we used to know. We can be so much healthier than we used to be. And that turns me on. I want to be part of it is I want to be healthier myself. I want to live as long as possible, but then I want to help other people to flourish. It's sad. I mean, I'm 72. I'm watching people my age just fall apart now. They're just fat. They can't do anything. They can't exercise. They have high blood pressure. They're getting cancers. It's so unnecessary. We have the knowledge now, and now it's about creating new systems that enable people. And also Love.Life's a community of people. So it's easier if you're an alcoholic and we send you to rehab. If you come back, you may be sober, not crave alcohol. But if you go back into the same community you were with before that likes to go bar hopping, you're not going to stay sober. You need a new set of friends. So Love.Life is about creating a community of people who all want to become healthy, the healthiest version of themselves. That's what it's about.
Am I right that there's also this sort of community center aspect to it, this like
Yes.
social gathering type? And
Yes.
I have to believe that was.
I left that out.
Sorry, go ahead.
We have a big community gathering space where we co-working, where we have lectures, we have talks, we have classrooms, and it's connected right next to our big cafe. So we can open it up and combine it with the cafe for evening type events.
I mean, that sounds awesome. Partially because, yes, there's a social element of doing sort of physical activities together, but I can imagine that the social element of whatever the community sort of center brings is fueling, the mental health and the social health and the emotional
Absolutely.
health of the people there, and that's such a crucial part of what you're talking about.
It's very hard for people. That was my point about the alcoholic. It's very hard for people to change in isolation. But if and our peers, our friends have a big influence on us. That's why if you want to stay sober, you need to get you need to make some new friends that are on the same path as you. And our families, if our families don't support what we're doing, it's very difficult. So the community is very important to help. First of all, you're getting peers and they're telling you what they're doing. They're giving you ideas and they're making suggestions. And so now you're thinking about it more too, and you got somebody talking to you about it. And you may say, well, this is not working for me. And they'll say, well, this is what let's take sleep. Uh, I made big discoveries about my sleep, again, because of my Apple Watch, which measured my sleep. And so I got another app called Auto Sleep. And so I started studying my sleep. So it's like, as a good philosopher, it's like, okay, I slept really well tonight. What was in common? I didn't sleep well tonight. What did I do there? And I discovered 3 things that were the biggest drivers of my quality of sleep. And this is in the order of importance. The first one is exercise. The more exercise I get, the better I sleep. The body has to go into deep sleep to do recovery. So it's very important that you get sufficient exercise and you will sleep better. I promise you, you will sleep better if you get more exercise. Number 2, eat very lightly and early at night. You should get most of your calories for breakfast and lunch. If you get most of your calories at dinner, I promise you, you will not sleep as well. If you do this experiment, start measuring your sleep, start eating lighter and earlier, or don't eat anything at all. I mean, people do intermittent fasting, oftentimes make their main meal at night. You should make your main meal probably at noon or in the early afternoon, and then fast the rest of the time if you're going to have that 16-hour intermittent fasting window. So, and then third, alcohol. I loved alcohol, and I made this unwelcome discovery that any amount of alcohol, even one glass of wine or one beer, would wreck my deep sleep. I'd get 0 deep sleep anytime I drink alcohol. So I did this experiment like 50 times to prove it, because this was a resistant truth. But finally, I decided I have to make a decision to drink or to sleep well. And so far, for 4 years now, sleep has won every time. I'd rather sleep well.
Yeah, I'm envious of the sort of experiments that you've been able to do. I mean, again, like thinking of the things that are included in Love.Life, like the gut health checks, the VO2 max checks that you're mentioning. It just sounds like a health utopia in a lot of ways.
Well, that's what we're aiming for. And of course, this is our first location, but we're hoping we'll have, all around the country.
Did I hear that there are plans for Austin?
There are intentions for Austin, but we don't have a location yet.
Interesting.
Look, one thing I learned from Whole Foods that's similar is location matters a lot. Good locations are the key to retail. And if you make a good location, you'll be successful. And a bad location, you might have the best idea in the world, but if people can't find it, or you don't have any parking, or your visibility sucks, then you'll fail. So particularly when you're early on, you got to make great locations. And this market's too dang competitive. It's overbuilt right now in Austin for office space, way overbuilt. It's also now housing has finally caught up with demand, but retail is way behind. Every retailer wants to be in Austin, Texas now, and there's just not enough retail.
So the last question that I have to ask you involves, you might, for lack of a better term, sort of philosophical health. And I'm wondering if you were the philosophy marketing czar. You have an interest in philosophy. I do, obviously. I have found it to be not impossible, but difficult to find ways to get people interested in asking the big questions, getting them interested in philosophy, even as a discipline. Most people don't really know what goes on in the discipline. I'm wondering, have you found ways to get people interested in those sorts of things that you're interested in as well?
I believe there's only a certain type of person that's interested in philosophy. Like my dad wasn't interested in it. He was on the Myers-Briggs. He was definitely an SJ, very responsible, dependable. It's usually the intuitive thinking types that are interested in philosophy. So I think you can't get everybody interested in philosophy. Most people they don't care. They just want to get on with their lives. It's like, what do I care? they might be into religion, but they're not into spirituality, you might say. And so they just want it. Just tell me what to believe. I don't want to spend a lot of time thinking about it. Smarter people have thought about it. I'm just going to follow one of them. But most people are followers. They're not looking to figure this stuff out on their own. So that being said, as a marketing, I think you need to market to the people that are interested. And I think the best way to do that is to raise those questions. I think philosophy, as you know, it's been on the wrong track for decades. It's one reason Tom stopped being a philosopher, right? You had you had I mean, the things that it's gotten language philosophy. You had, and then you had this cultural Marxism that just, sort of poisoned everything. It went from economics into every part of our lives, and everybody's either an oppressor or is oppressed. And so philosophy's gotten on these detours that most people aren't interested in, and they're boring. So I think asking those questions, like that first philosophy professor that I had, just engage in dialogue, asking questions like, well, you believe in God, but is is God is God good? Is God all powerful? Well, how can we have evil? How's that possible? Why would God do that? Either he doesn't exist, or is not all powerful, or she, no point in gender, or or she's not very powerful, or she's not good, or she doesn't exist. Take your pick. So those are questions to ask people. Ask those kind of questions. I really do think that the mind is just ready for the right questions. That's how you unlock it.
John, I couldn't be more appreciative of your time. It's so fun to talk to someone who does have the shorthand on the big questions and has a little bit of experience and even interest in those sorts of questions too, and someone who has just decades of some of the most interesting experiences and starting a new venture too. I'm so looking forward to seeing how Love.Life turns out. You were going to say something.
Yeah. Can I just want to tell you a story? I'll
Yeah.
leave the person named. He's a very good friend of mine. Um, he is interested in philosophy. But he's also an investing expert, and he's an atheist. And um, so we sometimes have these. We still have these metaphysical questions, and we always get back to, he's like, well, prove it. And it's like, I could prove it, but you'd have to do the same methodology. You're asking me to prove it to you by a standard that you can't discover it from that standard. It's like, and I say, you could either take a simple way to discover it, is you could do a psychotropic substance that would blow up your current framework. But there's a simpler way to do it. Just do breath work. Do a sustained breath work, and you will probably have a transcendent experience that will shake you up, because the interiority of human beings, people don't realize this because most people do not go they're scared to go in. But the interiority is where it's as vast a universe as the external, or more vast, really. But trying to get my friend to even do that is too scary. So I find it fascinating that people kind of don't want to know. They don't really want to know. They're too afraid to go to launch themselves on the discovery because they feel like they won't be safe anymore. And so philosophy, rightly understood, is an adventure into the deeper meaning of existence and who you are and why you exist. And you have to have sort of an explorer's, adventuresome attitude to want to go there. I think some ways philosophy stopped going there and it got boring because people were good at playing language games or talking about what these words meant. But they lost the spirit of philosophy that a Spinoza had, or a Nietzsche had, or a Kierkegaard had. These people were out exploring, asking these questions and then willing to go where their thoughts took them. That's what's great about philosophy, and that's what we've lost.
I think that's a great answer. It's such a good point too. There's some risk involved. And that's not
Yes,
always sort of like front loaded when people are asking those questions. Yeah.
that's why
John, thank
philosophy
you
and
so much. This has
entrepreneurship
been awesome.
have that in common, Jared, because you're on this adventure. You don't know how it's going to turn out. Nothing's guaranteed. That's what makes it. It's the hero's journey. Philosophers
Yes,
can
that's
be
right.
heroes.
You
The
mentioned
hero's
that. So I
journey.
want to point people I love
Go
that.
ahead.
I'll link to your book, your other books, and Love.Life, of course, and just encourage everybody to click on those links and explore. John, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Jared. I enjoyed it a lot. Hope we meet sometime in person.